The problem is quite thin. Because of this, stretches and chips appear in the first years of operation of the car. Despite this, the body resists the onslaught of the red disease well, but nevertheless, if you don't monitor the cosmetic condition of the body, you will not be able to avoid corrosion. The body begins to bloom in the places of chips. Also, corrosion can appear on the doors at the points of contact of the doors with the seal, at the front of the hood, and at the junction of the bumper with the car body. If we talk about the reliability of power units in general, then no serious shortcomings have been identified in these engines. The most common problems are floating speed and difficult engine starting. Most owners faced with these problems begin to change candles, high voltage wipers, wash nozzles, but as a rule, this does not give any effect, since the cause of this ailment lies in a software failure in the engine control unit. Reflection is required. It is worth noting that on some instances, the new firmware may not fit the old control unit. In such cases, the owners have to change the control unit. The original battery received a lot of criticism. The fact that it is very weak and with the advent of winter, its power was not enough for engine start. The problem is solved by replacing the battery with a more powerful one. Sometimes the reason that the car does not start in severe frost is not the battery, but a frozen starter. At each MOT, be sure to check the coolant level. The fact that the radiator is not durable and over time begins to leak. If this is not taken care of, the engine can suffer thermal shock, which usually leads to serious consequences. A corrugation is installed in the exhaust manifold, which connects the manifold to the resonator. The problem is that it freezes quickly enough, and the air that has penetrated into it confuses the oxygen sensor. If a problem occurs, fuel consumption increases, and the check engine indicator lights up on their dashboard. Owners of Kia Rio II with the 1.6 engine most often complain about the short resource of ignition coils. Kia Rio II was equipped with two types of transmission, a 5-speed manual and a 4-speed automatic transmission. There are practically no complaints about the mechanics. In rare cases, after 100,000 kilometers, the owners had to change the input shaft seals. And here, the clutch fails quite early. There were cases when it had to be changed after 30,000 kilometers, but such cases are rare. Basically, the clutch runs 50-80,000 kilometers. In the automatic transmission, as in the mechanics, no serious shortcomings were identified. This gearbox is demanding on the quality of service, and if these requirements are neglected, then, over time, the box will begin to kick when shifting gears. When choosing a car with automatic transmission, you need to take into account the peculiarity of its operation. At the beginning of the movement, the car has good acceleration dynamics, but with an increase in speed, it goes out. On a car with mechanics, the deterioration in dynamics is not so noticeable. The car is equipped with a semi-independent suspension, McPherson strut in front, rear, beam. Kia Rio II received the most criticism for the stiffness of the suspension, but it is worth noting that thanks to such settings, the car is well controlled. Many owners have managed to make the car more comfortable after replacing the original shock absorbers with softer ones. If we talk about the reliability of the chassis, then in general it can be called reliable, even despite the fact that some of its elements have a smaller resource than those of competitors. Traditionally, for most modern cars, stabilizers, struts and bushings are considered consumables and are changed every 20-30,000 kilometers. Also, the knuckle is considered one of the weak points. It is made of soft metal and bends of the era of U200B, U200B DHE shock absorber, even with slight contact with the carb or not careful driving through a speed bump. In the back of the car, after 40,000 kilometers, anthers and fenders may begin to rattle shock absorber. Closer to 60,000 kilometers, the rear shock absorbers may begin to leak. Wheel bearings, tie rod ends and ball bearings with careful operation go up to 80,000 kilometers. Front shock absorbers, thrust bearings and tie rod can last 120-150,000 kilometers. Silent blocks and levers, in most cases, live more than 150,000 kilometers. The steering mechanism is prone to knocking when driving. Abundant lubrication of the splines or replacement of the plastic bushings of the rack helps to eliminate the problem. As a rule, the right bushing breaks first. Otherwise, there are no complaints about the resource of the steering bars and the brake system. The Kia Rio II salon is not distinguished by exquisite finishing materials and interesting design solutions. Everything is very simple and cheap here. The car cannot boast of silence in the cabin. There are plenty of extraneous sounds. Squeaks, knocks, and squeaks are an integral attribute of the cabin. In hatchback cars, over time, the fastening of the rear sofa are loosened. Because of this, a roar is heard from the rear of the cabin, which many owners mistakenly take for malfunction in the suspension. Among the shortcomings in the electrician, failures in the operation of the climate control unit can be distinguished. The problem isn't pleasant in that it has a floating character. For example, the system does not work on the road, but as soon as you get to the service, the problem disappears by itself. Also, it is worth noting the small resource of the power window control buttons, heated windows, etc. If you are the owner of this car model, please describe the problems that you had to face during the operation of the car. Perhaps it is your review that will help readers of our site when choosing a car.